And we're very delighted to have with us this evening as our keynote speaker over the dinner hour, Chief Corrina Leween, who is going to be delivering some remarks. She's going to be showing a video, and then she and I will have a conversation afterwards to dig into some of the comments and themes that she's bringing forward. Corrina Leween was first elected Chief of the Cheslatta Carrier Nation on May 23rd, 2003. The youngest Cheslatta person and the third woman ever to hold that position. She has served 4 terms, being re-elected by acclamation as chief in 2015 and again in 2017. She was appointed vice chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition in 2015. A graduate of the University of Victoria, Chief Leween has many years' experience in First Nations governance. Her leadership has been a dynamic force in local and regional economic development initiatives and has helped to make her nation a driving force in the northern British Columbia economy. Please join me in welcoming Chief Corrina Leween to the stage.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Hari Soanzan, Taike, Denise, Skaise. Masi Cho for inviting me to this conference. Also Masi Cho to the Algonquin people on whose territory we do business today. I want to thank the University of Ottawa for inviting me here to speak on this very important issue. In particular, I'd like to thank Monica Gattinger for inviting me here. She's been keeping in contact with the Major Projects Coalition and some of the work that we've done and has shown interest, so thank you. And it's also nice to see another Aboriginal leader in the room, Kim Barrett, who has led her community in economic development, and I've heard really good things about all the work that she's done for her community. So it's really nice to see you here. 2 Burns Lake women. British Columbia women, sorry. So we've covered great distances here to come to Ottawa. Cheslatta Carrier Nation territory is located semi-remote in north central interior of British Columbia. So it's quite a trek to get here. We're about 3 hours from Prince George, for those of you that know where Prince George is. And we're happy to make this journey because we have an exciting and a very important story to tell you. The First Nations Major Projects Coalition is changing our people's lives back home. We see a chance for real control and meaningful prosperity. For the first time in generations, we see the opportunity to be in charge of our destiny. We live in an interesting time in history of Canada and its relationship with Indigenous people. For our communities, we are assembling the tools needed to create significant change. I see a historic opportunity for Indigenous groups and communities to collaborate with other orders of government to create a better and shared future. First Nations-led organizations like the Coalition have a central but perhaps unexpected role to play in shaping the future. I will start by outlining the work and the structure of the Major Projects Coalition. Our nations established the Coalition in 2015 with the purpose of converting our legal and constitutional rights into financing, well-being, and independence. The Coalition is a First Nations-led response that addresses community-level business capacity and resource gaps. We started as a group of 11 First Nations that were looking for equity ownership in major projects in our territories. In only 3 years, the Coalition has grown to a First Nations-led organization of 40 elected and hereditary First Nations. Other nations from across the country are exploring the possibilities of joining with us. We developed a comprehensive suite of economic and environmental technique models that can be used to the benefit of our members. These models, when implemented, will allow major projects to proceed with our involvement and, most importantly, with sustainable First Nations ownership. Our elders have told us to build economic opportunities for our youth and for our communities. The major projects allows us to move forward. Our mandate is non-political and business-focused. We provide development, project approval, and investment models for consideration by our members. They can implement these models as a single community or, more likely, as a consortium of nations. Communities retain their autonomy to make decisions. The coalition does not impose ideas, speak on behalf of the interests of communities, or negotiate for them. The coalition does not favor or oppose any specific kind of development project. We provide the technical support for the services and the capacity support to our members upon request. We help them achieve their goals and their plans. The group does not oppose the group does not impose its will or priority on any of our members. Our collaborative and transparent structure makes it possible to provide vital technical services to a large number of First Nations dispersed over a wide geographical area. In particular, in the area that we're talking about, the geographical area is spread quite vastly. With financial support provided to the coalition by the Government of Canada and the Province of British Columbia, we are able to provide services to support informed decision-making amongst our communities free of charge. The model of sharing the skills, sharing the risks, and sharing benefits will give our nations the ability to participate when and as they wish in an economy that prospers on their land. Never again will development occur without us, around us, and without our active participation. We plan to be partners in carefully managed, environmentally sound economic development. On this note, I'd like to take the time to recognize the support we have received from Minister Jane Philpott, Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould, and Minister Catherine McKenna to continue this work. The federal government continues to collaborate and be responsible to the needs of our members. And does most recently, the Government of British Columbia, who has stated they see value in their relationship with our coalition and our willingness to collaborate. Our structure as a nation-based and community-driven organization has attracted the interest of First Nations in other parts of Canada. We are building towards becoming a national organization. At our March annual general membership meeting, members of the coalition moved to create an extra provincial caucus, enabling First Nations in other parts of Canada to join our coalition. I can speak with great passion about the work the coalition does. However, how we are structured and why the coalition is so important. But to fully appreciate the significance of the coalition, you really need to see this process in action and hear from others about the value it adds. I'd like to show a short video presentation. This presentation was shot during our last meeting at our membership meeting in Prince George, British Columbia.
does is they facilitate meetings between industry, government, and other proponents, investors that are looking to develop in.
Creator, bless these gathered here today with understanding, forgiveness, and patience. And may we always see the good in one another and treat each other with respect. Amen.
We have been able to assemble a list of industry representatives who have traveled to be here today and to share their work with us and to listen to our priorities related to major project development.
I'm Sharleen Gale. I'm chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition. I'm also a councillor for Fort Nelson First Nation. First Nations across Canada are saying that they need to be part of major development happening in their territories, not only to close the social economic gaps, but the infrastructure gaps. What the coalition does is they facilitate meetings between industry, government, and other proponents, investors that are looking to develop in their lands.
We are primed for partnerships. We are designed for partnerships.
I'm Philip Dugan, Vice President of Business Development for Canada for Amberic Development Partners. We create the electricity businesses of the future. We need local partners to push projects forward. We know that First Nations want to drive forward renewable energy development. We've got the expertise to do that, and we think that they're the best local partner you could have.
We're really focused across the country and more recently in the United States on wind, hydro, solar, and more recently storage development.
I'm Jason Edworthy. My role is Director of Community and Indigenous Affairs at Bluearth Renewables. I think that the value of the coalition is that it's providing support to so many communities, now totaling 40 different First Nations. It just makes it easy to come to an educated and well-resourced group of nations that have come together, all for the same purpose. They're looking for deals, they're looking to work with business, and they want to do it right.
These public-private partnerships, or P3s as we call them, are not a panacea.
My name is Mark Romoff, and I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships. Well, the mandate of my organization is really to work with governments and Indigenous communities across Canada to help them really make better investments in infrastructure in order to get the very best outcomes for communities. It's a very good point you're making because it's an opportunity for First Nations communities across the country to take an equity position, and so all of a sudden they've got a stake in the project.
So my name is Angel Ransom. I'm from Nakazli Watan. I'm from the Kwamba Watan clan, which is the Caribou clan, and I'm the Environmental Stewardship Technical Team Lead. We conduct research, we create tools for the communities. The Environmental Stewardship Framework will get major project coalition members the tools they need when they need them in ways that make a difference in protecting lands, waters, and ways of life.
My name is Ricardo Toledo, and I am a member of EAO once again, the Environmental Assessment Office, as in the position of acting Executive Director for First Nations Relations, has a mandate to revitalize the environmental assessment process to ensure the legal rights of First Nations are respected. We can directly say that this will result in changes. We will be making changes. We will be implementing the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People.
When we think about a major project, we think about how can we preserve and also create renewable resources so that we can leave something for future generations. I think it's so important that Canadians understand the things that First Nation people have gone through over the past 100 years. And to see provincial and federal policy change to incorporate Indigenous values when looking at UNDRIP and the 10 principles that have been passed down by the Minister of Justice is so important that we start thinking that way as Canadians.
We've got a number of equity or partnerships that are quite significant. I will suggest that we must improve that. And it is currently a narration that prosperity in Canada means prosperity for all folks. It's more than just an equity stake in the regional. It means a really deeper dive across Canada. What does that lens look like to share the prosperity to all Indigenous people all across Canada?
This isn't just a regional initiative, this is a national initiative. Like I said, First Nations across Canada are saying that they need to be involved in major infrastructure that's happening in their communities.
My name is Derek Fox. I'm the Deputy Grand Chief of Nishnawwbe Aski Nation. I'm here to talk about the First Nation Sovereign Wealth Fund. So you have the Ring of Fire, you have Wate, you have the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and they all need our support as advocates, as leaders. We have these vast resources in the north, the Ring of Fire. Wate is just getting started. Like many of our leaders, we're very passionate about the same thing, which is a better lives for our people, better lives for our young people.
Our role is strictly financial in terms of providing advice to get our clients the best, cheapest source of capital, the highest level of ownership. PwC is financial advisor to the First Nations as well as to the project. And we have been working with Wataynikaneyap for 5 years.
Wataynikaneyap, we worked with our elders to help us name the project. Hi, I'm Margaret Kennequanash from North Caribou Lake First Nation. I am the CEO of Wataynikaneyap Power. Wataynikaneyap Power is a transmission company that's owned 51% by 22 First Nations and 49% by our partner Fortis. And the goal of Wataynikaneyap Power is to connect remote First Nations to the transmission grid. Our First Nations are working towards controlling and benefiting from a major infrastructure within our territory. At the same time, how do we develop the model, financial model of a project that will create that benefit meaningful way and also create that capacity.
The opportunity to work with a group like the Coalition who's very focused on making sure that Indigenous communities can really make headway in addressing their own economic issues, for us, this is a natural partnership.
Who better to have than, as your partner than people that have been on the land for 10 or 15,000 years?
As a First Nation leader, I am so proud of the work of the Coalition. Now we are seeing a new light on how we can move forward in this economy, how we can look after our people by working together.
I would encourage the Coalition to continue to work together, set a standard of expectation, to be part of any major infrastructure in our homelands and to have a say in that major infrastructure with industry, governments is so important in creating a future and benefit for our future generation. So stay together and kudos to all of you for the work that you do.
Thank you. As you've just seen, the work that is going on within the Coalition is setting a new benchmark for Indigenous economic engagement and empowerment. As a chief of my community, I can't tell you how encouraging it is to see our neighbors working together to advance our commonly held interests. Through this, we will change forever the way business is done within our lands. We now have a forum where our elected and our hereditary chiefs and leaders can gather to discuss the business properties. For a long time, our communities have not seen eye to eye. We work in isolation and often against each other. The historic division has perpetual effects in our communities can be overcome. The work the Coalition does shows this can be done. As many in this room will know, the last federal budget identified resources to strengthen the capacity and the independence of Indigenous communities. To be truly effective, both of these initiatives require that Indigenous communities work together. Policy decisions moving forward must recognize the value that the nation's ability and willingness to collaborate brings to Indigenous capacity building and informed business decisions. It is central to our ability as a people to achieve self-determination and self-reliance. We have had generations where our small size, our isolated locations, the limited resources weakened our power and undermined our effectiveness. The Coalition is built on the idea that collective action makes us stronger. Our ability to have access to professional capacity and institutional support is becoming increasingly important. particularly as the federal government moves to sunset the Department of Indigenous Services, as Minister Philpott has stated. The government is committed by their words and deeds to creation of a rights reconciliation framework, the integration of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples with Canadian laws, the creation of a new fiscal relationship with the Crown, and a new way of delivering infrastructure to our communities. All of these initiatives require that our communities have access to the resources to engage. We alone can determine what this new reality means to us and how success can be achieved. Furthermore, the work of the Coalition will allow us to shape how and when development occurs within our territories. In our view, Canada needs to support development policy and set funding priorities in full collaboration with Indigenous communities. Only in this way can we arrive at a shared process that creates the certainty around new projects. I want to focus in for a moment on the connection between the work of the Coalition and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP for short. The Coalition and its services are, in design and executed, inspired by UNDRIP. The Coalition is showing how the government can structure their interactions with Indigenous governments to live up to the principles of the Declaration. These interactions should, and rightfully so, challenge the status quo and bring about dramatic and sustainable change. The presence of the Coalition and other First Nations-led initiatives show that UNDRIP matters in the lives of Indigenous people. The prospect for significant change also generates fear of the unknown. Consider the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. The Coalition addresses these principles in the context of the major projects development. It provides a foundation for shared decision-making processes between Indigenous governments, other orders of government, and proponents backing development within our traditional territories. We often hear the Prime Minister and the members of his cabinet say that the environment and the economy can be balanced. We can get to that balance by working together. But working together is what matters the most. Our tools and our models ensure that the traditional and the cultural interests of our members can also be balanced with the commercial requirements. We are tired of being poor. We're tired of being dependent financially on the government. We can and will use financial prosperity to support our self-determination and self-reliance. This work is operationalized by the Coalition through 3 cornerstone process documents. 1, a model ownership toolkit. 2, an environmental stewardship framework and project assessment standards document. 3, a project identified and capacity support criteria document containing a project scoring criteria. This is, in essence, a First Nations definition of what a major project is to our members. Governments and project proponents need to understand that the work of First Nations is well underway. We will administer our own affairs and advance our own future. Our nations are ready and have been ready to act. We also have to inform government about our needs and provide them with a roadmap that will allow us to develop these collective skills. Likewise, governments can assist the process by engaging groups like the Coalition in technical discussions. This often takes place at a political level or through time-consuming and expensive negotiations. We also need these partnerships in the operational level within the bureaucracy. working with departments and central agencies in an open and a collaborative manner. Some departments are open to this engagement. We have had a great exposure to, for example, with the Aboriginal Law Section of the Department of Justice. Senior officials of the department have taken the time to meet with the coalition. They have shown a willingness to understand our needs. At the same time, we must be realistic. Change of this magnitude will not come easy. We need to exercise tolerance and understanding as we address the challenges that lay ahead. There will be missteps along the way by our nations and by other governments. But if we stick to our resolve to advance change, we will accept occasional errors, provided that the spirit of collaboration remains strong. I believe I will get to see the day where our communities will get to a place where we have the tools necessary to join the economic mainstream of Canada. We will harness a portion of the wealth being generated from our own lands. Our people will be sitting on the boards of the corporations working within our territories. We will be equity owners. Our communities will be submitting permits and applications for project development jointly. This will all occur because we have engaged each other early and often and work according to our mutual interests. We call on governments and project proponents to support our efforts to capitalize on this new reality. We ask them to collaborate with us to build a sound technical approach to the policy options for change that our First Nations Major Projects Coalition is bringing forward. A new future, one based on Indigenous rights, autonomy, prosperity, is within our grasp. In closing, I'm reminded of the words of the late Chief Justice Lamar. As he read the ruling at the Supreme Court of Canada judgment on Delgamuukw, he said, "Let us face it, we are all here to stay." So as we move forward in an era of collaboration between Indigenous communities, governments, and the private sector, we all know that there will be many challenges. In dealing with these challenges, let us not forget the meaning of those words. We have a shared future. Let us base it on shared decision-making and shared prosperity. Masicho awatsa. Thank you for listening to me tonight.
We have to call up the podium moving muscle here. Great, thank you. So Chief Leween has kindly agreed to answer a few questions. What I really enjoyed about your talk, Chief Corrina, even more so hearing it live than having had an opportunity to see it before you delivered it tonight, is just how in line it is with what we heard energy leaders saying in the armchair discussion. We need positive stories. We need to be looking at what are the things that we can do to move forward positively. So thank you so much for that. Very, very inspiring words. One of the things in your remarks, right at the very outset, you talked about how long it took you to travel to be here with us today. Why did you feel it was important to be with us today and to make the trip?
Yeah, it was, I'm sure Kim can attest to it, to come across it takes so many hours of traveling, sacrifices, leaving your families at home and all those things. But it's important to get the message out about what the coalition does. That's why when Nilo asked me to come here, you had asked Nilo if I could present here. I was like, we were coming anyways.
Well, now
we were coming, but it was just an honor to be asked to address as a keynote speaker, because the word really needs to get out to the general public about what kind of tools are out there that will allow some of the questions that were being asked on the panel earlier to be answered. Because some of the questions, I was sitting I was like, that's what we're doing. And so it's really important to acknowledge that there are tools out there that we can use together. And having international and national interest in what the coalition does just proves that some of those tools and the message is getting out there. So it's important to keep it, to keep the message at the forefront of our First Nations people, as well as our proponents, and as well as government. And that's why I'm here tonight.
Well, we're very grateful that you
Mercy.
made the journey. You touched on the division within Indigenous communities. I think, you know, and if there's one thing that we're seeing actually with the latest controversy over the Trans Mountain Pipeline is that there isn't a homogeneous opinion either within or between Indigenous communities. And you touched on your remarks about how the coalition and its work over the last very short period of time has actually worked to build bridges between communities that are often divided. What drives, or in the British Columbia context, what drives division between communities, or what has driven division between communities, and how does the work of the coalition help to overcome that?
The main area that I see as a leader, and I'll only speak for myself and my community and the communities around me, is the situation with our governance structure. We need more capacity back home to develop the abilities to work together. It's an internal thing, but it's also a governance structure. Having lived under DIA's rule for so many years, it almost becomes a part of our everyday living back home. So with the coalition's help, we've been able to take, which is not heard of in our area, 40 First Nations that are actually supporting each other in working together, complementing each other, and providing the knowledge that needs to come into a governance structure for our people.
Mm-hmm. You've also been clear in the remarks that you made, and I think it's probably related, but I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on this, that the coalition is a First Nation-led technical organization and not a political body. What is the relevance of that, the fact that it's not a political body in terms of the success of the coalition's work?
The coalition was first started by 11 First Nations that wanted to become proponents or partners in the pipeline, and could not access the capital to make it a sustainable project. So they went to the Financial Management Board in Vancouver and asked for help. One of the things and the biggest message that those leaders gave to the development of the coalition was that it would be a non-political body, so that the true issues would come to the table and they wouldn't be clouded by political interference of any kind. So it was one of the requests of our leaders in the nations.
And it's continued that way since that time then?
Absolutely.
Oh. Yeah. Terrific. What can government, you alluded to it a bit in your remarks, but what can governments do, both provincially and federally, to continue to support the work that the coalition is doing?
Continue to provide the capacity support that we need to carry on. We continuously negotiate as a board and a technical team to access the supports financially, technically around the coalition carrying on. We've started a process right now. We've got 40 First Nations on board in a short period of time, like you mentioned, and we have to keep that process working. So policy development as well as legislative support around what the governments can provide for us and how they can support us additionally to our technical supports that we already have at hand would be great.
Great. Last question, and I'd like to bring it to your community. What is the history between your nation, the Cheslatta Carrier Nation, and resource development, and why did your community choose to become a member of the coalition?
First of all, our community chose to be a member of the coalition because of the technical support that is available, the advice that we get through the Major Projects Coalition, which is again a free service, is very important. Especially my community is a small community, it's semi-isolated, and we have an 85% employment rate, and that is, it's kind of unheard of in our area, but it's because we have that drive from our community to succeed. We, again, like I said, we don't want any more handouts. So the coalition provides the advice that we need to enter into negotiations to create a major projects in our area. And we have one particular pilot project which is on the tables right now, and it's called the Kenny Dam Water Release Facility. In 1952, Rio Tinto Alcan had flooded us out of our territory with 2 weeks' notice to pack up and move. So the land that has been flooded continues to flood yearly because there's no release for the water. So they just massively release it, and then it refloods our territory. So the Kenny Dam Water Release Facility for the Cheslatta Carrie Nation would provide an environmental fix to that problem, but also we'd like to see it as being an economical project. As far as other industries, like I said, we're located in a semi-remote area, so we don't have the novelty of a highway running through our territory. We have very little economic development opportunities, but we do participate fully in the forestry industry, which has kept our band afloat, but we also ensure that our environmental impacts, footprint on the ground are, we participate in that so that we're not over harvesting in our area, and that the water, birds, they're all part of what we do, try to do, keep in mind for the environment as well as the economy development.
Terrific. Chief Leween, thank you so much for making the journey to be here. Thank you very much for answering these questions, and I'd like to invite everyone to join me in thanking you.
Thank you. Masicho.